Hey, everybody. Welcome back again to another episode of the Egypt Travel Video Podcast. As you can tell, this time we are not in the normal studio location. We're not on the interview set. We're not in my normal monologue studio set. We are in the middle of the Nile. We're on the banks of the Nile. There's the middle of the Nile. We're in a city about an hour south of Luxor called Esna, and we're actually on a dahabeah boat, which is a traditional Egyptian sailboat that's very antique looking. Even the new ones are made to look antique. They're small, they're private, they're more upscale than the larger mass market cruise ships, but they're a really unique, genuine, authentic experience and something very unique and specific to Egypt. I'll talk a lot more about dahabeahs in another episode. I know I've been promising that for a long time, and we've been using dahabeahs now quite a bit over the past couple of years for groups, for charters, things like that. So I'm due an episode on dahabeahs, so I promise I'll get that out soon. We actually are here taking a lot of video on dahabeahs so that we can show more of what they look like, what different ones look like, et cetera, et cetera. But that's where we are. That's why this scene looks different. This setting looks different. You can see literally the real Egypt in the background here. And as I babble on talking myself, you're probably wondering, who is this guy sitting next to me? So in this episode, I asked a friend of mine, Curtis Ryan Woodside, to join me for an episode of the Egypt Travel Video Podcast while he was here on the dahabeah with us sailing for 3 nights from Aswan to Luxor. And I invited Curtis to come on this dahabeah with us because we were meeting up the other day in Cairo, and he happened to just casually mention that he's never been to a site called Silsila. And I just happened to have a charter booked of a dahabeah, one of these sailboats, the next week, and they always stop at Silsila. And so I thought, oh, Curtis, you should come on the dahabeah with us next week. You've been on dahabeahs before, right? And he said, no, I've never been on a dahabeah yet. We all know what they are, but a lot of people, can't fit them in their schedule, especially when you're busy. I'll explain in a minute why he's so busy. But he just mentioned that he'd never been to Silsila. He'd never been on a dahabeah. And so I was like, okay, you absolutely have to come. We have one. We have extra cabins. They're going to go unused if you don't come use it. And coincidentally, it just all worked out. He happened to have been in Egypt for a while this time. He had extra days at the end of his trip. He was kind of like, even saying, oh, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do these last couple of days. I've just got all these just hanging around Cairo. I've already done everything I want to do. And I was like, all right, that's it. You've got to come down and, experience it on dahabeah, go to Silsila for the first time. And this gave us an opportunity to sit down and do a podcast together while we're in the same room on the same boat floating down this.
Well, we're not in the same room.
No, well, not in the same cabin, but we're in the same room now, on the same boat. And we have the time. On dahabeahs, you have lots of time, lots of free time. So we finally made it happen. Curtis is a filmmaker. He's an Egyptologist. He's in Egypt, all things Egypt buff, right?
Yeah.
He is, but in addition to those things, or coming out of those things, Curtis is actually unique. He's not just someone who, is really fascinated by Egypt, really interested in Egypt, does Egypt related content. Like, Curtis goes above and beyond. I mean, he does really amazing long form content on Egypt. He's a documentary filmmaker. He does most of the work himself. He doesn't have the backing of National Geographic behind him, throwing millions into production and camera equipment and
Only.
he makes this, and I'll put in the links. We'll show some video clips of his documentaries. Hopefully you'll go and watch some of them because they're really amazing. But you will see that these are on par with the types of documentaries that these big production houses do, and it's all him. I mean, he's going around with his equipment sometimes with just iPhones, as you can't get in certain places with certain types of equipment, doing all of his own editing, and it's just incredible. So that's why I'm saying, and you produce a lot of content. You produce a lot of long form documentaries and films, and everything from 45 minutes for some to 4 hours for others. So, I really wanted to have him on here to talk about that. We'll talk about Egypt, we'll talk about some other things, where he's from, things like that. But I just want to tell everybody up front that one of the reasons I really wanted to have Curtis on the podcast is because, and listeners to the podcast, and people who watch the video podcast and the YouTube channel, are really interested in. I mean, you found me usually because you're searching for info, practical info on travel to Egypt. And usually, before people are searching for info on travel, they have been watching historical documentaries and lots of documentaries about Egypt. And that's why now they're planning to come to Egypt. And then after you get all your plans in place, then you get excited by going back and watching all the historical content and stuff like that too. So Curtis's YouTube channel will be a good resource for a lot of people.
I've met a lot of people actually here in Egypt, and they all come up to me, oh, we watched your documentaries, that's why we came.
Oh
So
man,
I was like, wow, okay.
yeah, and they don't. It took me a while to find you. Like you didn't pop up like some of the like History Now and National Geographic and some of these like well established production houses. Essentially, they come up on your YouTube recommendations. They come up on some of your social feeds and things like that. Yours took a while to sort of come across my radar, but once I found you and started following you, I realized this is like a lot better than a lot of that other content because they film on Egypt, they film on China, they film on the Roman Empire, they film on they're kind of jack of all trades, whereas you really focus on and specialize in Egypt.
Some of those producers are not Egyptologists.
Oh, for sure.
So
I'd say
they will
like
produce
none of them
something.
are, right?
Yeah. They will produce something. They might have a basic understanding, but sometimes the incorrect information slips in.
Oh yeah. Or sometimes maybe their entire premise for making their documentary is completely off base. We talked about that recently. You see a lot out there, but my point here is that Curtis is his filmmaking is very focused. It comes from a place of expertise, unlike most other filmmakers and production houses. As great as they are, Curtis is really unique. So that's why I wanted to specifically sit down with him and introduce him to you all, so that you can get familiar with his content and get excited about coming to Egypt. So, with that huge long introduction, let me turn it over to you a little bit, Curtis. You People can probably tell by now you have an accent.
Yeah.
You're
And I have no voice today, so I'm so sorry.
Well, I'll share a little bit of behind the scenes. Curtis and I on the boat the other night, we just randomly launched into impromptu karaoke night, and so we both like sang our voices away the other night. Mine's recovered, his is still recovering. So you do things like that when you're on a dahabeya. Anyway, so just to give you a little bit more of a formal introduction, Curtis is originally from South Africa. He lives in Italy now, and you kind of have that weird introduction that I have. People are like, "Where are you from? What do you do?" I'm American. I live in Spain. I work in Egypt.
Yeah.
Curtis is South African. He lives in Italy. He works in Egypt.
Yeah.
So we're kind of like profile twins
Well,
when
the
it comes to that
first time I met you, I thought you were Spanish
because of the name
because of the name and because of where you're
and
living.
where I live. Yeah.
And you approached me and you started speaking with this American accent, and I was like, "What? What is going on?" And then you explained, no, you're actually American.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think everybody who lives in Egypt, works in Egypt as an expat, has an interesting story, a roundabout story. No one's ever just like, oh, I came here for a job and I stayed. It's
Yeah.
usually, no, I came here, then I found this opportunity, and then I moved to Antarctica, and then I fly here from Antarctica every week. It's some weird story.
Yeah.
But anyway, my point here is that Curtis is like me, and that he's originally from South Africa. Well, I'm not, but he's like originally from a place. Now he lives in another place, and he works here in Egypt, and
Yeah.
Egypt is the common connection. So
Yeah.
with that, can you tell us a little bit about like where are you from in South Africa, and how did you get to Egypt? What got you interested in Egypt?
So I'm from a small village, about 2 hours north of Johannesburg. It's called Bella Bella. In Sutu, it means hot, hot.
Ah,
So it's one of the hottest towns, and we have like a underwater hot spring. So
well,
that's where the town gets its name.
so you're from hot,
Yeah,
hot
hot,
South
hot,
Africa.
hot, hot. That's where I'm from. Um, yeah, and when I was like 6 years old, and I've a lot of people who watch my stuff know the story. I I was on a bus visiting my grandmother in Zimbabwe, going from South Africa to visit her, and they were showing the Mummy movie with Brendan Fraser because we don't talk about the Tom Cruise one. Um, and Brendan Fraser, Rachel Weisz, and I watched this as like a 6-year-old kid, and I fell completely in love with the beauty of the ancient Egyptian art. And the bus arrived before the film ended, which really annoyed me as a child. So it always stuck in my head. And I made it my mission to find the end of that movie. And I've seen it about like 300-400 times. And that started the reading books on Egyptology, watching the documentaries, um, And, watching documentaries as a kid, this was when Egyptology documentaries, I feel, were at their height. So the early 2000s. It was all facts. It was interesting stuff. The presenters were like Zahi Hawass, Salima Ikram, Kara Cooney. These were the people I was looking up to.
So you said your the first documentary you did was a travel related documentary on Egypt. What was it like? How to get here and
It was
around?
what to expect, what you experience, going to the sites, hearing about the history, that kind of thing.
And that was 2016 ish.
16, 17.
Okay. YouTube was around then, right? Was it YouTube
Yeah, yeah,
published on?
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah. So when I first made that, I had pitched, ideas to like, I went big time. I was like trying that, like History Channel, Travel Channel, all these places. And they came back and they said, well, your stuff is not history enough. And like Travel Channel said, it's not travel enough.
Mm,
So then I realized, okay, I fit into my own category.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Um, had you produced content on other topics before that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
travel to other places, or what was it about?
Yeah.
Or like I'm thinking like in the 2015, 16, like at the time you started
yeah.
in Egypt, were you doing like on travel to other places or?
I wasn't doing travel to other places. Around then I'd been to, Eurovision.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had been asked to do a behind the scenes documentary at Eurovision in Vienna. But really the start of it, where I was like being recognized, was when I was doing a lot of documentaries with Celine.
So you actually have a real history with Celine and a personal connection with her and her family. Where did
Yeah.
that come about, and what's that about?
So like you said, I don't like to throw it out there. So I just say Celine. And then people, usually put two and two together. I don't like to go like, oh, when I worked with Celine Dion? Like I'm not like that.
Yeah, yeah. I've noticed that it's almost like you're just saying, "Oh yeah, my friend Anne, yeah, when
Yeah.
blah blah blah," and you're just like my friend.
Because I've seen her in such a way where, she's at home, no makeup, hair up. I've seen her in this way. Um, so I see her in a different light.
So if I remember correctly from us just chatting the past couple of nights, you actually got your start in filmmaking through your family's connection with Celine Dion and her family. How did that come about?
So she was in South Africa doing the Taking Chances World Tour. And, I'd always looked up to her and I really wanted to meet with her. And we had this big dramatic meeting. I was like 11 years old. Like I made a fake backstage pass, which allowed me to go and watch the sound check. And like we had already connected with Celine's brother and Renee's son, Patrick. And it was already arranged that we were going to, meet with Celine, like
Mm-hmm.
have an official meet and greet. But, my mom was not trying to tell me this. It was going to be a surprise. So that wasn't good enough for me. So we went to the sound check. She was on stage. She went off stage. I went round the back, through the legs of the security guard, this little 11-year-old, and I ran up to her. She got such a fright that security tried to take me away, and she screamed at them, told them to put me down, and she hugged me, and from then we just had this connection.
It reminds me of that scene in Love Actually when the kid jumps over the security guard, runs through the airport to go to the gate.
Yeah, it's something like that. It was something like that. It was this dramatic meeting, so of course, that's going to be stuck in her head. And the next day, we're at the hotel where she was at as well. And Renee came down and he wanted to speak with me. And Renee said to me, look, she got a bit of a fright, but she likes you and she's coming down in like 10 minutes. So she wants to see you again. So that was great. And we just, got this connection. Um, and then she went on with the tour. She had the babies. And my mom sent some flowers to the house in Florida. Congratulations on the twins. And the day before Christmas, we got an email from Patrick, which is Renee's son from another marriage. And it was an invitation, like, come to Vegas over Easter. You'll see the show. You'll see Celine. Come. So yeah. And then while in Vegas, I was telling Renee what I want to do with my life. Um, I think I was like 14, it's like 2011. Um, and he said, okay, you want to make documentaries? You make a documentary about your story with Celine. But so we came back, they invited me back, we shot the documentary. And from there, I would, do she did some performances on TV where they asked me to do the background. So I thank her a lot for her and Renee for giving me this boost.
So that was when you were how old that you started out filming
Like 14.
behind the scenes for her? About 14. And then how old were you when you first came to Egypt?
I was 21
Okay.
and now I'm 30. So it's 9 years.
Wow. And so during that time between 14 and 2021, you were still living in South Africa? You were back in South Africa
Yeah. Yeah.
going
So that's when I went to film school. I did other documentaries.
Oh, you went to film school.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Collaborating with other people, doing documentaries on other things.
Oh, wow. What sort of other thing between sort of Celine Dion musician behind the scenes um type work and then Egypt, what other types of topics did you do filmmaking on?
So it was mostly the Celine stuff, which was the connection between us.
Okay.
I did like short films and things I wanted to do. I actually wanted to be a filmmaker. So the Egyptology was like a hobby. But after the first visit that, developed. So I did all kinds of short film projects.
Have you been to a lot of film festivals? Do you like to go watch films at film festivals?
I've been to one film festival, but I've participated in like 40 film festivals now.
Okay. But as
So,
you mean as an attendee, you only been to one?
yeah.
But you've been to many because you've been
My films have been
participating.
screened at many,
Okay.
but I've not been able to go.
I think film festivals are like a really underrated thing. Like I love film festivals. I've been to quite a bit. Do you have favorite ones you like?
So obviously the first one that I went to, which was in Greece last year, and that was great because it was an archaeological film festival. So
Oh, wow.
everything was history and archaeology. It was great to see that.
Oh, nice,
Yeah,
nice.
made a lot of connections, heard interesting stories from people also making documentaries in Egypt.
Yeah, I think people don't think a lot about film festivals. I mean, unless you are introduced to that world or you're in the filmmaking world, people don't realize. And, most of them members of the public can go to. You can buy tickets and attend the screenings.
Yeah.
And these are films that are not out yet. Usually, the filmmakers are there trying to get them to get deals on them to get them
See, I put
distributed.
mine out already. I put my stuff on YouTube, and I will always put my stuff on YouTube for free because this is how I started. And I feel I have this base of viewers that not expect it, but they like it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, I have my two agents and they distribute my documentaries all over the place.
So after you came to Egypt for the first time in 2016, you made a sort of a travel documentary about Egypt. Um, and then how long was it before you started getting into really wanting to make historical documentaries? And even, I mean, you go really niche on a lot of topics too. Like, how did that evolution come about? Was it quick or?
It was quick. I first started with this mission of making stuff that's aimed at a younger generation to encourage them to get into history because I saw there was this big divide. People my age did not care about history, and I wanted to encourage that. But that didn't go across the way that I wanted it to go across. Try and do a modern perspective on Egyptian history. Um, the, I did a series for that for Amazon Prime, went well. But just after I did that series, um, I I really focused on now just telling historical stories. I just felt that if the audience is interested, they're going to be interested.
You've obviously been all over Egypt. You filmed all over Egypt. You traveled all over Egypt. What are some of your favorite sites, temples, monuments?
Ah, it's difficult.
It is, right? It's like choosing your favorite
Child.
child or your favorite pet when you've got 10.
Yeah, you can't choose. I would have to say either the Temple of Dare, which is on Lake Nasser, which is also not accessible by the normal cruise boats. So I did a Nile cruise a couple years ago, also documented that and wrote a book about it. And yeah, that temple for me was great because there's no modern lighting inside. It all comes through the main door. So you go inside and it's pristine. It's not touched. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no, because the modern lighting I don't like in the temples. I like to see Egyptian art with the sunlight.
That's how it was originally
Intent.
seen and intended. Yeah. Except maybe a little bit of fire at night, but
Yeah.
during the day, yeah, morning, noon, and evening, it would have been natural sunlight.
Yeah.
And
And the Ramesseum as well for me. I love the Ramesseum.
in Luxor.
Yeah.
Wow. Not a lot of people go to that because it's been sort of in various states of renovation and restoration, and People are starting to ask about it more and talk about it
Yeah.
more. And the first one you mentioned,
You're
actually,
welcome.
I'd never even heard of the first temple you mentioned. Not a lot of people go down to Lake Nasser. They fly over it going to Abu Simbel
Yeah.
from Aswan, but very few people actually go to anything on Lake Nasser.
Yeah.
Is it on the shore or on an island?
It's on the
On
shore.
the shore.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if there's not a lot of roads down there. There's the road from Aswan to Abu Simbel.
Yeah. Which is on the
And
other side of the road.
oh, so this is on the eastern side.
I believe so.
The
Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
I believe so.
But even still, there's so few roads down there. I would imagine a lot of places are only accessible by boat.
Yeah.
So wow, that's needed. And what's funny is I tell people all the time, I've been in and out of Egypt for 22 years. There's still places I've never heard of.
Yeah.
Certainly places I've never been. And I learn something new every day being here.
Yeah.
That's a temple I've never heard of.
Yeah. I mean,
You say it's one of your favorites.
it's one of my favorites.
Wow.
Yeah. And like yesterday when we went to the three niches, the shrines at Jebel Silsila, because you can visit the main temple and some of the quarry, but the three that I wanted to see, and it was a specific scene I wanted to see, it's not accessible. You can't walk there, and you made it happen.
Yeah, we went on a little adventure yesterday. There was these scenes in this temple that was kind of off the beaten path near Silsila that Curtis really wanted to see if we could, get up close and look at. And even we were thinking maybe best case scenario, we could just take photos from the boat, zoom in or something like that. But we're like, let's just go. I mean, I've been to Silsila many times. I've never been there. I didn't even know that was around the corner. Um, and then, he'd mentioned, yeah, there's this other thing around the corner. I want to try to see if we can, go see it. And I'm like, let's just go. Let's jump on. We got the tugboat from the Dahabeya. We set sail, and we went around the corner and down the river a little bit and found it. And then it's really overgrown on the riverbank there, so we had to kind of see if we could find a place where we could get closer and closer. And then we didn't even know if it was even legal if we could get off the boat, if there'd be any place to pull the boat up,
Put a plank, walk across.
yeah, like we didn't have any, if there wasn't a natural place to dock, we didn't really have a way to get across because it was just a tugboat, so we didn't have the planks from the Dahabeya. We didn't have, we weren't prepared.
Yeah.
And luckily there was
this older guy
dude there.
Yeah.
With a dude just like showed up with a rowboat.
Yeah.
And
he was more than happy to take.
He was so happy to see us. And we thought, we thought we were like, oh, good, this dude's going to get us in trouble. We're not supposed to be here, or whatever. And he's like waving us on over, pointing to his rowboat. I got a rowboat. And so he came over to our tugboat, and some of the guests from the Dahabeya came with us. So we probably were about 8 or 10 people in total. And we're going through the lock right now, by the way. We're getting ready to go in.
There's a little real travel
gates. Yeah, this is real. And then they're going to fill up the lock, and then we're going to continue on sailing down the Nile towards Luxor. We seem to be going really fast, actually, entering the lock. I hope this Dahabeya has brakes.
Oh well,
but yeah. So we get there. This guy shows up, and he's really receptive to us being there, and he's saying I'll help you come on shore and visit this site that nobody ever comes to. And he rowed us back and forth 2 and 3 at a time for 20 minutes till we all got on shore.
Those tiny rickety little boats.
Oh, I mean, it's I'm surprised that none of it fell in the Nile.
When I got in, it was almost filling with water. Oh God.
Yeah. I mean, it was a genuine, authentic experience. That was actually fun. So yeah, we went on this little adventure the other day. And again, I'd never even known this extra temple was around the corner from this site that a lot of people go to. Curtis knew about it and said, let's go check it out. And we went on this adventure, and we ended up exploring this site that was really amazing, scenes that you won't see anywhere else in Egypt.
Yeah, you got the hippo goddess shown, Tawaret. You've got her shown with the head of a woman, and you don't see that anywhere else.
So she normally has the head of a man, or the
head of a hippo.
So she's normally depicted as an animal,
yeah,
and then she's depicted in human form, a human head form, at least in this one.
Yeah,
and that's the one where you showed me where she was pregnant.
Yes, with this big belly.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the first scene that I saw, I was looking for the scene of Nefertari with Tawaret, the great royal wife of Ramses II. And I walked up, and I was it was all very much covered in spider webs.
Mm.
So, dusted some of the spider webs off. And I was taking pictures of it. And then I realized, no, this is not Nefertari. This is Isetnofret, the second one. So we walk to the next one, and there's the same scene repeated, but with Nefertari. It was interesting because the one scene where you have Nefertari, that shrine was built by Ramses II. And the one next to it was built by Merempetah, the son of Ramses and the successor of Ramses. And it was interesting to see that he showed his mother in the same way that Ramses showed Nefertari.
So his mother wasn't Nefertari?
No, no. Merempetah's mother was Isetnofret,
Okay.
the second wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Did Nefertari have children?
She did. She had about 6 children.
And why did none of them become pharaoh after?
Because a lot of them died.
Oh.
So remember, Ramses lived for such a long age that a lot of his children died before him.
Oh.
So
Okay.
he had a special tomb made where he could put all of his family members in because there were just too many of them. I mean, 150 children, you know, yeah, it gets to be quite a thing.
So, speaking of Ramses II, your most recent documentary is an amazing piece on the great Ramses himself, Ramses II, Ramses the Great.
Yeah.
Ruler of Egypt for 67 years.
67
and he
years.
lived to be 90 something.
About 96 is 96. What the latest estimate.
You know, it's incredible. It's incredible in 2025 if somebody can live to be 96. It's almost unfathomable in like 1825 if somebody could live to be 96. But this is what, probably like 1825 BC?
Yeah.
More than
Ramses was around 1350 BC.
1350 BC.
Yeah.
And he lived to be 90 something years old, ruled Egypt for 67 years, had over 100 acknowledged, I guess. Yeah, it's official.
Yeah.
Legitimate princes and princesses.
I mean, the list of the children at each temple, it's always changing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the infighting and cattiness?
Well, that's what ended his dynasty.
Yeah.
Yeah. So each family member thought that they had the right to rule. So when he died, there was all this internal fighting between them, and it actually ended up in a civil war between, the two sides of the Ramesside family.
Oh wow! And so Merempetah is the one that sort of won that civil war.
He was succeeded the throne without any problems.
Okay.
But directly after him, his son Seti II, he started to have problems. You have viziers making issues because they believe someone else should be the pharaoh. It should be continuing from the line of Ramses, not Ramses' children, while there's still Ramses' children alive. And then we end up with Pharaoh Siptah, who was born quite disabled. As far as we know, he could barely move. And his sister, Tawazret, she became a female pharaoh ruling on behalf of her ill brother. And we don't know how she died, but suddenly a new dynasty starts right after she dies.
Interesting.
So, and it's believed that Ramses the third and Setnakht were somehow related to Ramses II.
You know, it's interesting because obviously modern history is more proximate to us, so we know a lot about, and there's a lot of films on and studying of, the kings of England, European monarchies, things like that. But
Meghan Markle,
yeah. I don't know if it's because it's so distant from us and different from, where we grow up and the things we learn about in our upbringing, or because it's just so overwhelming. But people don't realize how fascinating Egyptian history is. And I mean, I tell people, I calculated one time, sort of averaging and estimating, if the US, for example, we've had now, I think we're on president number 47, and we've only been around about 250 years. If you kind of average out, you obviously have to put some lines somewhere, but Egyptian history would have been as if we had 900 presidents and we're at number 47. That's how massive the time span of Egyptian history is. And
I mean, for Ramses, the Great Pyramids were ancient already.
Yeah.
They were already around for 1,000 years.
1,000 years old. And ancient Egyptian history still, it ended, if you want to include the Greco-Roman period or not, I mean, still ended, almost 2,000 years ago. And then before that, you had thousands of years of ancient Egyptian history, and it's just so overwhelming. But when you zoom in and you look at, like pick a pharaoh, Ramses II, look at his family, his, the politics around his reign, his children, politically what was going on in Egypt during the time. I mean, just that one pharaoh and everything coming out of him topically is probably equivalent to like all of English history and all English monarchs.
She is something like that.
I mean, Henry VIII and the competition between, um, you know, um, Mary and Elizabeth and all the
And all yeah,
that's nothing. I mean, imagine if Henry VIII had like 115 kids.
yeah.
He only had what, three?
I'm not sure.
Mary Elizabeth and Edward. But I mean, we think of Henry VIII as like, one of the most, I mean, there's movies about him, multiple, tons of documentaries. We think, people, it comes up all the time in our culture. And,
So does Ramses, but it's not correct.
yeah,
Unfortunately.
but what we know and what we talk about is just such a fraction, a minuscule amount
And what
of
we
what
know
there
is
is.
so small. We think we know so much, but what we know, how Egyptology works as a science, there's a lot of psychology behind it. So you read this text, you read this text, you read this text, and it sort of helps you pin everything together. And then okay, so because this happened, then successors could follow. So, when we look at like the Battle of Kadesh, we actually have to go back to the reign of Tutankhamun. And you can understand from his death, Ankhesenamun, his sister and his queen, that needed to get a husband. And she wrote to the Hittites and asked for a Hittite prince to marry. This guy was sent and he was killed when he arrived in Egypt. And this started the war between the Hittites and the Egyptians. So you really have to pin a lot of stuff together in Egyptology. And even when you look at common people and their families and things like that, you can go into a tomb and you can see, like we have the tomb of Mena. And inside Mena's tomb, all of his faces are removed, except his wife. So, I mean, if you read into that, he did something she didn't like, and she went in there and took his face out, so he cannot have an afterlife.
Wow.
Yeah.
And see, I think most of those people you just mentioned are probably people that the most people out there have never even heard of. There's so many layers and just so much depth
And
to Egyptian history.
there's a tomb, interestingly, in Saqqara that I saw this time, and it was something I'd never noticed. So you have all of the men shown, fishing and doing all this stuff, and one guy had gone in and put his name in graffiti above the image that was him. And he'd done this several times in the tomb. So he really wanted people to know, I knew this guy. Here's my name, and this is what I was doing.
So he was like
Just a commoner.
in this happened to be in the scene that was painted or carved on the
Yeah.
wall.
And he went into the
And he
tomb.
went in and said, like,
The Lestaba tombs were accessible. You could go in and leave offerings. And so he went in and he put his name next to every image of him throughout the tomb.
wow. And that's really unusual because you don't have much history of commoners in Egypt. I mean,
Yeah.
it's everything that's left that was
This guy-
carved, that was recorded.
This guy really thought about, if he's in this tomb with his name and he's carved on the wall, he can potentially get an afterlife without having his own tomb, just because his name is connected to that image of himself.
And thousands of years later, we're sitting here in 2025 talking about him.
Yeah.
Wow. It worked.
Yeah.
And like flyers. It's real Egypt. Oh, now we're in the lock.
Well, we haven't seen a camel yet, so.
No, well, we got a ways to go to Luxor. We'll see.
Yeah.
So, speaking of the depth and breadth of Egyptian history, I think that's one of the reasons why, even though some people may initially be a little overwhelmed by the thought of a 4-hour documentary, I mean, the topic merits that. I mean, Ramsey. Okay, Tutankhamun reigned for what, 9 or 10 years, and is honestly historically one of the most insignificant pharaohs in history. Significant to us because his tomb was found intact and we have all his gold, and that's fascinating to us. And it actually did, reveal a lot. We learned a lot from it. Egypt benefited a lot from it, but a kid, a teenager that ruled for 9 years, Ramses II, almost 7 decades. He deserves at least 4 hours in every documentary about him. You're right, you can't.
I tried. And I first had the idea of 3 hours. And then after writing it, I was like, okay, this has to be 4 hours now, because it's just not possible. If you want to understand the guy himself and not give the National Geographic overview, you have to go in deep. So you have to understand the people that lived when he was alive. You have to understand all these different aspects.
And think about, too, in our lives and the lives of our parents or grandparents, people we know, the changes that happen over the course of decades. You're a completely different person at 30 than you were at 15, and a completely different person at 50 than you were at 30. And so you, especially with somebody like that, it was so significant, so, long lived, you can't paint him in one brush and say, like, this is what his personality was like. This is what influenced him, because it could be something totally different 5 or 50 years into his reign. Like, those are, I mean, can you imagine, even just saying it out loud, it's kind of like ridiculous,
He did change. He did change. Around the time when Nefertari died, we see him stepping back. We see him not going into military battles. We see him sending the sons out. And we see statues in his later life where he actually looks quite depressed. He's got jowls hanging down, looking very unhappy. He's put on weight. They've put lines on his neck to indicate age. So it's interesting. And in his older age, he still depicted himself the way that he was probably feeling, because the love of his life was gone.
So, Curtis, actually, how long did Nefertari live? Do we know that?
That's actually a really good question, because this is where we have what I call the regurgitation of Egyptology. And it's facts that we hear. One person does a miscalculation, and the facts kept getting retold and retold when it's not actually correct. So we are actually redoing the Nefertari documentary that I've already made, because it was done during lockdown. So it was like Zoom. Everyone was interviewed on Zoom, which we've moved on from that now.
Yeah.
So we want to have a proper documentary. And actually, when we examine the timeline of Nefertari, it's said that she lived until the age of 30 and that she died. If that's true, she met Ramses when she was -5.
It'll be a little difficult.
Yeah. So we can work out from the timeline from when certain events happened in Ramses' life, like when she visited Abu Simbel before, literally a few weeks before she died. We can work out that she was about 50 years old. And Sophia Aziz has looked at the mummified legs of Nefertari that we have. And that correlates to my calculation that she was about 50. And it also shows that this woman's legs were about 50 to 55 years old. So she did live longer than what we keep hearing.
So that's a significant new development that,
Yeah.
I mean, 30 to 50, that's, almost double the lifespan.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of people know that she lived longer than 30. But the thing is, in the public sphere, we keep hearing 30 because it sounds so tragic and it's great in documentaries. And I'm going to correct that for my own documentary. And it takes a lot of courage to actually admit that was wrong. We're going to redo it and do it correct.
Wow. And so when do you expect that documentary might come out?
Maybe later this year or early next year. Okay. So the big one for December is going to be Hatshepsut.
Oh, that's a great story.
Yeah. Expect like 2 to 3 hours on Hatshepsut.
Wow.
Yeah. So myself and Dr. Hawass, we've been working on this project for like 2 years now. Sophia will be in it. Sahar Salim will be in it. Salima Ikram will be in it. And it's Lami will be in it. So it's going to be great to hear the full story of Hatshepsut told sort of from an open mind.
And that's another one that's really good to go into. And I'm glad you're doing that, because that's another one where so much misinformation is out there, or just there's so much unknown information. I mean, people, because I go to the sites a lot with groups, and I hear guides all the time talking at the entrance to her temple. And, people say, oh, she's everything from this calculating female Machiavelli of the ancient world who undermined her stepson and placed herself on the throne, to a co-ruler with him who got along great with him and lived happily ever after until she died, and then he took over and blah blah blah. And there's also that, the power politics of gender, and some people say that, people defaced her statuary because they didn't like a woman ruler later, and some people say it was her stepson because he was mad she usurped the throne, and we just don't know. Like, there's so much misinformation, so much.
There is, but we're going to try and correct that. So Dr. Hawass has made a discovery at the mortuary temple of Tutmosis III. And there's blocks there with the name of Hatshepsut and Tutmosis III together, and it hasn't been damaged. And this actually proves that Tutmosis III respected Hatshepsut enough to keep her name there. So we know that that defacement would have come slightly after, maybe by priests, who knows, but we know it wasn't Tutmosis III.
Hmm. Good. It's a good thing that this information is getting updated, because people don't realize, the whole field of Egyptology um, is really less than 200 years old. I mean, you can, in 50 years or 30 years, so much new research is being done, so many new discoveries are being made, that it could totally change the trajectory of what we know as history of some of these people. It's hard to imagine too that, I mean, I love antique books. I love reading, books from the 30s and the 20s of this, the 1900s. I love reading books from the 19th century. And you have to take everything you read about Egyptology from these, antique books with a grain of salt, because, like, for example, if I'm reading something from 1910 on Egypt, King Tut's tomb wasn't even discovered then. And so much has happened in the past, even like 30 years, that it's hard to fully believe things that were written 30, 50 years ago.
And you have to keep updating, you have to keep refreshing your information. And if you don't, I'm afraid to say you're being foolish. You have to keep checking what's the newest theory, and then go back and look at the other theories, and then look at the evidence, and then make up your mind.
It makes sense too, because, the application, we say this a lot, it makes the news a lot, and it's in documentaries a lot as well, but the application of modern technology, modern medicine, forensic science to Egyptology is evolving. And, a new machine could come along that's used in, cancer detection or something, brain scans, and all of a sudden someone gets the idea or the funding to apply that to Egyptology. They scan a mummy, they scan some bones, and you realize, like you said, for example, maybe 30 years ago they didn't have the technology to closely look at
Like
the
DNA and stuff, yeah.
yeah. And so, they just accepted all this time that maybe Nefertari died at 30. And when you look closer now, maybe it, seems obvious that she lived
Longer.
longer. And I'm sure, it's fascinating too. It's exciting to think about what new technologies will be available in 10 more years and 20 more years that allow us to look even closer
Yeah.
into the lives and histories of these folks. Curtis, you are producing such great work, and I'm so excited for people who don't know who you are, who don't know about you, who haven't followed you yet, to go discover your YouTube channel.
Oh, thank you.
And, like you said, you've had things published on Amazon, right?
Amazon, Tubi, Apple TV, Roku, it's like all over the place.
All the platforms. So just searching for Curtis Ryan Woodside on any platform would bring them. But YouTube is your primary platform where you put everything out, right?
Yes, and that will always be for free.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And so, yeah, so if people who are researching travel to Egypt, just discovering, delving into Egyptian history, preparing for trips to Egypt, especially if you have specific periods or specific individuals, characters from history that you're interested in. Curtis showed me a list the other day of the documentary ideas he has that he's going to be doing over the next couple of years.
And they're all shot for.
They're already done.
They're all being
So
shot.
now it's just editing. Wow. So there's going to be a lot of content coming out, and on specific characters from history that you don't see a lot of other people cover.
Yeah.
Like, who's some examples of some folks who were.
So you're going to get Sennacherib.
I don't even know who that is. Who is that?
Sennacherib was one of the tomb designers during Ramses II's reign.
Wow.
We couldn't even cover him in the Ramses documentary because his story is just so interesting.
Oh, wow.
We're going to look at the Greeks in ancient Egypt. And the Greeks were actually in ancient Egypt before Alexander arrived. About 200 to 300 years before Alexander was in Egypt, there were Greek people living here. There was always a trade, so we're going to investigate that. And the only country that ancient Egypt never made war with was ancient Greece. Think about that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of fascinating info coming up, documentaries coming out from you. You're in Egypt a lot, so imagine people following you on social platforms just see you, not just history, but your daily life here, the things you're working on and doing,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
things like that.
We
So,
just climbed Serabit Al Khadim, 3 hours up, 3 hours down. It's like 850 meters. Um, that was really tough. It was really tough. But the documentary that's going to come out of that is going to be so great because it looks at Proto-Cyanatic, which shows the first beginnings of our alphabet that we use today.
oh wow,
Yeah,
well, yeah. There's so much depth and breadth here in Egypt.
yeah,
People don't realize how diverse Egypt is, not just historically, geographically, culturally, linguistically.
yeah,
It really is a bucket list destination for folks. But
yeah.
anyway, Curtis, thank you so much for all the time. Thanks for joining us here on the
Thank
Dahabe.
you for listening. Yeah,
As you can see, we're floating by more of Upper Egypt, so southern Egypt, and on our way to Luxor later this afternoon.
yeah.
But anyway, Curtis, thanks. It's been a pleasure. It's been a
Thank
joy.
you so much, and thanks for having me on this, beautiful Dahabia, giving me the opportunity to see Jebel Susila. I have 3 places that I needed to see: Jebel Susila, Asayut, and Aknim. And now I've just got 2 left.
Well, we'll have to have you back again. We'll do it
Thank you.
again. This is the first time, but it certainly won't be the last.
Thank you.
You're very
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you, everyone.